I'm currently in the world's echoiest room, so vibes are Welsh. I don't know. Like we're renting like this big old like sandstone building, and the ability for the internet to get through walls is kind of like limited. So I'm chilling out where the routers are in the pool room. It's gonna make me seem really like epic today.
Ooh.
Yeah, exactly.
Go.
Exactly.
Yeah. Cool. Let me see. All right. Is my thing not on? Why is my thing not on? There it is. Hey, it's me. You get to see
it's
me.
your boy. It's your boy.
Not in a special room.
Yeah, look at this.
Just in.
Oh.
That's nice.
It is nice. It's like there's like this really campy swimming pool here. So it's like I'm on holiday with my sister's family.
Yeah.
So it's like it's great. You can take your American niece and nephew to Wales, and they're like, yeah, castle. Can we go play in the pool? And you're like, cool.
Damn kids these days.
These kids today.
Hey, it's thundering here. We got thunder. We got the echo. I got that weird thing on the background of my audio again. I don't fucking know what's going on. Yeah.
It's the drama, mate. That's the we're not so different promise. Is the drama. It's what we deliver. That the other pods simply cannot.
No, they can't. They can't.
Oh God.
Yeah. Things are going great here in the States. We are.
Yeah. Okay. So like Trump getting shot, I was having like it's not my birthday until this week, but I was having my birthday party last week since I'm away. And I like saw the thing about Trump getting shot, and like I yell across, like I'm sitting at the table and I yell over to Justin and Blair, and I'm like, Justin, Blair, Trump got shot. And they're like, what? No shots. That's stupid. We're not doing shots. And I'm like, that is not what I said at all. Like,
give me the Trump shot.
I was not offering to do, never mind.
The world's grossest shot.
It'll be like, some kind of orange liqueur and Diet Coke.
Yeah,
Diet Coke and Mandarin Napoleon.
Grand Marnier.
Yeah, there you go. Oh, that's rank, dude. No.
Oh God.
Love.
Kill me.
I heard that haunted Funko Pop is the VP pick too, so that's nice. Got that going for us.
Dog, living here right now is I don't even know what to say. Like I don't.
Oh mate, I don't know. Like it's
like on the one hand, it's like surreal watching this, and and like seeing all these people be like, that's it. He's gonna win. Like there's the most epic photo of all time. Like it's
Gome.
It's he's won the presidency with this, and I was like, he's not a likable person. Like,
no,
he's not a likable figure to anyone except the people in his hardcore base. A lot of Republicans basically tolerate him because they have to, whatever. But he's not a likable person, and this is not the way things used to be. People are like judging this on like, what would have happened in the 80s or the 70s or something like that. And it's like, that's not where we're at anymore. People are feeling precarious. They're feeling an existential pull at the edges of their reality. Most Americans are doing this for the first time ever. And, that causes I mean, it causes the meaningful pole of, the acceptable center of bourgeois politics to move, fast. And like the first polls coming out showed Trump getting like no sympathy bump from this.
Good.
I've seen like 0 + 1, but that's about it. Like, if this had happened, in like the 90s or the 80s or whatever, like you would have gotten this huge sympathy bump. Even probably like, Obama probably would have gotten one too if something like this had happened. But like, people just don't care. Like, they don't like this guy.
Quite right too,
They don't like this guy, and like, it's also just a perfect storm of stuff that Republicans like can't deal with. It was, it's like a security fuck up, because the Secret Service fucked up, and local law enforcement appears to have as well. Trump is unlikable, and the shooter was a registered Republican. Like that, like it means that you can't just be like left-wing violence, something like that, because you don't have that. So Republicans just fall to like fighting about fucking whether the Secret Service is too woke, and that's why this happened. It's like,
I can't. Like, it's an incredible scramble, and it is one of those things that I will say. It's like, I assumed it was some kind of Republican, which is interesting. I was like, I don't know why, or like to what end. Like, is this an attempt at exactly this, creating sympathy for him or something like that? Like, who knows? But it's like, when it came out, I was like, oh yeah, that's good. I figured, and I was really hoping it would be, and it is. But
yeah, no, he like, it's just he I mean, like, the Democrats could still win. They could win. They just kick Joe off the ticket and put Kamala in, and like, she's polling higher than Trump now. She like, they could do this, but like, they said, like, I think it was Sunday morning, they were reporting that like a top house Democrat is like, well, we've just accepted that Trump's going to be the nominee now. And it's like, why?
I would simply not do that,
He's not he's not popular enough to like win independent poll. You just have to stop hemorrhaging votes enough to actually do this, and to do that, you just have to get rid of Biden. Like, and so you just have this push and pull. And I mean, like, I don't know what's going to happen. If Joe stays on the ticket, they're going to lose. And, I don't know where it goes from there. But, like, I mean, it feels like things are shifting in America. Not like, not at like a, not in a way where, like, you can, like, you could just, like, see it and everything. But, like, this is, people did, like, if this had been 10 years ago, like, the incessant droning about like the horrors of all this stuff and blah 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 would have gone on for days and days and days and days and days, and like, it would have dominated everything. But yeah, I mean, you do still get that stuff. You do still have like op-ed writers like crying and rending their garments, throwing ash over their heads because political violence. Oh, we don't have room for political violence in this country, except we do to poor people and minorities and leftists and all the other countries of the world. And what we've been doing to Gaza for 8 or 9 months, and it's like, people can see that. Like, you are, you just, like, you have these huge, like, shifts in people. People can see that. Like, Democrats have, like, I mean, I don't know, they probably lost, like, thousands upon thousands of potential voters because people don't just trust them anymore. Because, like, even if you think Joe Biden is senile or whatever, like you can still, but if the party comes out, he's like, no, he's fine, he's doing all this stuff normally and everything. Like if you're just like a normal person with like a fine job or whatever, and you don't really want to buck the status quo because you're, safe for the time being or whatever, which is a lot of Americans, probably most of them, if we're being honest, most people in the world too, for that matter, because most people aren't just like revolutionaries at heart. But when you lie to them and when you say, yeah, this guy's fine, this guy's fine, this guy's fine, and they find out, oh no, not only is he not fine, like he wasn't fine when they brought him into office. Like we were lied to about that. We've been lied to about and so now these people have no reason to trust the Democratic Party. At the same time, the so-called progressive wing, the Squad, AOC, and all those people, and Bernie are like backing Biden to the hilt on this, and it's just like, not only do you people have the worst political instincts of all time, you're like you've abandoned the young people who were your largest backers now will abandon you for going back on your principles, continuing to support Biden while he's doing a genocide, continuing to support Biden while he's obviously senile. Like this is not like, and yeah, so I don't know. Maybe there is an opening for a left in America. I really don't know, because like now things are just like going nuts. And I mean, I don't think that like that you could solve anything like overnight, but like I don't see how the Democratic Party avoids like a insane crack up over this whole thing. Yeah. Either before or after. So I don't know. I guess we'll see.
As long as one old man doesn't have his feelings hurt, I'm sure it's fine.
Yeah, it's fine. I mean, it's great. I love having to find a new state to move to.
Yay.
Yeah, that is fun. All right, yeah, let's
talk about other political instability.
Yes, let's do it. Let's talk about whatever these people are doing. All right, here we go. 3, 2, 1. Hello, and welcome back to We're Not So Different, a podcast about how we've always been idiots. My name is Luke Waters, and I'm an amateurish historian, and as always, I'm joined by Dr. Eleanor Yannicka, who is anything but. Today, we're going to conquering. Come with us. It's going to be so much fun. Everybody loves to do it. Conquering and war and all that jazz. We don't have a question right now, but we have a couple, and they will be along shortly. But yeah, you know the deal. Subscribe to the Patreon. Give us money. $5. It's fun. Get to ask us questions. We
like you more if you do it.
Yeah. It'll be fun.
Did you know that work is kind of better when it's remunerated? I don't know if you know about that.
Yeah, it is. That's how it goes. Yeah, patreon.com/WNSDpod. It'll be fun. You can listen to us talk about the name of the rose and other such fun things. Anyway, today, let's move on to our main episode. So we arrive at last at the Norman conquest of England. This is when the England of yore, a misty backwater sheepfold on the periphery of Europe, began to form into the England we all know and despise today.
That's right.
The time when English heritage, as we understand it, begins in truth, with 4 real claimants vying for the throne: a bastard Norman Frenchman of Danish descent, a literal Norse Viking king, and 2 half-Danish, half-Germanic brothers who are relatives of the late king. A 5th claimant, a teenager who technically had the best claim to the throne of all of them, will be crowned ever so briefly, though he wasn't taken seriously either by the other claimants or historians. Cry God for Harry, England, and St. George. Huzzah. It is one of the single most... I have no idea why I remember that every time, but whenever I want to make a joke about England, it's just the best way to finish it off.
So real.
Yeah. Norman Conquest is one of the single most consequential events in world history as it permanently altered English society and culture. For more than 1,500 years, the British Isles were more closely tied to the barbarian Germanic tribes and, more recently, marauding Viking Scandinavian peoples of northern Europe who had invaded the island many, many times over the years. But the Norman Conquest reorientated England away from that and toward the Norman peoples of Western Europe, who were themselves... barbaric, marauding Viking Northmen who had violently settled in modern-day Western France and become known as the Normans. And maybe it wouldn't have made much difference. What's one group of Vikings versus another, right? If not for the fact that these Normans, no matter their origins, were slowly being syncretized into the wider French Christian tradition by the inexorable passage of time. And that would make all the difference. Stranger than that was the nature of how the conquest itself went down. Edward the Confessor gave up the ghost in January 1066, and his cousin, Harold Godwinson, the first of our four contenders, was crowned rather hastily only a few days later. Immediately, the three additional claimants to the throne announced their intent to contest King Harold's accession, and then nothing happened in England at all for like 8 months.
Yeah.
What's more, there are really only 4 battles in this whole thing, at least in 1066. And when the others begin to arrive, 2 claimants will have combined their forces into what should be an unstoppable juggernaut, only to die like dogs. Finally, the winner of this whole thing won't even arrive on the island till very late September. Would only fight one actual battle and would be crowned on Christmas Day 1066, just short of 3 months after his arrival. It would not be the last time that an upstart distant relation with a tenuous claim to the English throne would wait for the other claimants to tire themselves out fighting one another before sailing in to take the crown. Woo! All right, let's go. Before we get on to Edward the Confessor's succession problems, we have a question from Gafsy who says, what's up with the Normans? They obviously weren't the only society with a highly militarized aristocracy in the Middle Ages, but they seem fairly unique, as far as I know anyway, in that their conquest from the English Channel to the Adriatic were so geographically disparate rather than carried out by a single polity or even dynasty. Did Norman society just create conditions for a bunch of bloodthirsty assholes all willing to shoot their shot, and the law of averages just meant that a few got lucky, or was there more to it?
I mean, I would say kind of is the answer. That's essentially it. Okay, but there's a couple things that we need to remember, right? Like, so these guys are kind of like a new form of Viking, right? And, traditionally, as we were just saying, the Vikings took over places all the time. Like they would take over England if they got bored. They'd take over Ireland. They would do places like that quite often, right? So there's already kind of a precedent for attempting to just like take some land. The Normans are essentially still doing that, but what they've got is like this kind of other gloss as well on top of it, which is like the Frankishness, right? So they're kind of coming in at a time when like the, Carolingians had kind of faltered and things like that. But they've got this understanding of, when I'm like, feudalism isn't real, right? Like they do still kind of pick up on, this idea that, well, in exchange for me lending my military power to other people, I should get land, right? And they do pick up on that, but it's also a little bit like as a result of Viking stuff, right? Because it's like, well, why did I sail over here if I'm not gonna get more things? So one of the things that ends up happening, like when you see, for example, the Vikings show up in Sicily and places like that, Normans show up in Sicily and places like that, usually they were kind of like lower down the food chain, Normans, where it was like they are not going to get any land in Normandy, So yeah, they kind of got to shoot their shot because it's like, well, you're not like, I mean, it's a nicer life than the peasants are going to live for sure. But like, you're not going to ultimately be this big rich guy unless you can go take over some land. But also what they're very good at doing, I think, is identifying political instability. So they're good at finding places where things are a little bit up in the air. So like when they show up in southern Italy, you know, they are exploiting initially the Eastern Roman Empire's weaknesses in the area. Like the Seljuks have kind of shown up over in Asia Minor. Constantinople is looking over there. They're having a much harder time, like holding down Calabria or whatever. Right. So they're kind of like, well, hey, I can kind of do that. And they're able to play off like the varying nobility who live down there that are sort of like have been like a kind of in place since, the Roman successor states. Right. And so they can kind of do that, and they can, take advantage of the church at times. So they wiggle their way into situations like that. Another thing is that we often tend to kind of forget about all the Norman ones that don't make it. Like they kind of try Malta and that doesn't work. For example, like they end up in like places in Spain and they're like Spain and everyone's like, get the fuck out of here, bro. It's just that you tell stories about the times that it works out well. So you kind of have the Viking thing where it's like, oh, we could get in a boat at any moment and go somewhere. Why not? Plus the kind of like a bureaucratic Frankish thing of being like, I'm also good at paperwork and I've got these 4 guys who would all like to have fancy houses. And you've just kind of got this sort of like political news that they've kind of got together. So it is, I think, you're kind of bang on here, Gafsy. It's like they are just kind of dickheads, but also like they are good at finding the timing when it makes sense to shoot your shot, right? And that makes all the difference, right? Like they have impeccable timing. And indeed, I would say that the conquest of England has rather a lot to do with timing, as we will get to later.
Yeah, exactly. So Gapsy, thank you for the question. Picking up where we left off last time, Edward the Confessor dies in January 1066. Also, once again, I must say, it's really annoying it's called the Confessor. It should just be Edward II, the Confessor. It's really annoying. It doesn't make any sense.
But he wanted to be a saint, Luke.
He's not a special boy. I
mean, he is, eventually. Well, he got that
true.
Wish, so...
Yeah, he got me there. He dies in January of 1066 with no clear succession plan in place. Eleanor, what can you tell me about Edward's many failed attempts at naming an heir, and why doesn't he get one?
Yeah, okay, so, Edward had been... I want to make it clear that Edward fucked. All right. Like, just because he's holy, he wasn't one of those who was like, and also I don't fuck. Like, he really was trying to knock his wife up and it didn't work. Right. And so that is where things get complex because we just have varying numbers of stories about what was supposed to happen. Right. So, William himself gets to the throne after the death of his half-brother Harthacnut. Right. Because his mom is Emma of Normandy, as we talked about last time. And he was basically he grows up in Normandy. He's incredibly Norman, right? And so that's one of the reasons why it's kind of plausible that maybe he did say that William was his heir or whatever, right? So he'd been educated there, he'd been raised there, and it was basically it was like if a Viking ever invaded, they were like, get this kid out of here right now, they will kill this kid, they'd send him off, right? So he shows back up in 1041. And and he's doing Norman things, right? Like he starts building Westminster Abbey, which is an incredibly Norman looking building. And he spends all this money on making a big stone church, which is like a statement about Normanness, right? Because the pre-Norman English were still building with wood mostly. And he brings back a lot of Norman counselors and Norman fighters and things like this. So, it gets to about 1051. So, about 15 years or so before he dies. And it's like, probably should have had a son by now. This is not going particularly well. So maybe he calls William over and is like, homie, please to be my successor. Right? Possibly. Maybe. And the connection here is that William is the grandson of Edward's maternal uncle, Richard II. Right? So they've got like a Richard II in common. Like it's pretty disparate though. Right? And the reason that this happens, that people say that this happened, is because Edward is currently fighting with his father-in-law, who is Godwin, the Earl of Wessex. Okay. Godwin was incredibly powerful, had a lot of money, and Edward had exiled him. And so he's like, okay, well, I've kind of made a very powerful enemy here. I need to make sure that I've got someone lined up, right? But Godwin shows back up in 1052, and they seem to get back in each other's good books. Godwin gets his lands back, and like William in return like says, I promise to stop acting so Norman. Right? So for example, like he'd put in a Norman Archbishop of Canterbury, and they like get an English guy in instead. So there's things like that. Okay. But like basically, so that's what's kind of going on. There is no real idea of who is going to take what, because fundamentally this kid, he just doesn't have any kids, right? And like that is a big worry, because that's supposed to be like what was going on, right? And then William is like, in theory, like, oh, I guess, well, I'm the heir apparent or whatever. And then he's very, very busy, like fighting in Normandy, like surprise, like there are all these things like going on over there, right? So, but then basically back over in England, Godwin dies in 1053. And that's when Harold Godwinson takes over the earldom, right? And it's an incredibly powerful earldom. He is really good theoretically with ships, which kind of like people are like, oh, fuck yeah, ships. Woo. Right? And then 12 years later, here comes Edward's death, right? So we have a few sources on this. So the Vita Edwardi, which is like written to make Edward look like a saint, says that like when Edward was dying, he says, my successor is Harold, right? And they say that the people who were there who witnessed this are his wife Edith, Harold, and the Archbishop of Canterbury, the new guy Stigand, as well as Robert Fitzwimark. Okay. So they're like, okay, all right, Harold gets crowned. Fantastic. And William is like, absolutely get fucked, right? Like I got told back in 1051 that I'm the heir, right? Mm-hmm. And then there was, of course, also this little interregnum with Edgar the Eighthling, which I think I would have liked it if he had become the king. So Edgar the Eighthling, as you mentioned, he's only like one tiny baby at this point in time. And everyone is kind of like, you're probably right, probably not, right? Like he's over in Hungary, which is also like, because his dad was Edward the Exile, who was Edmund Ironside's dad. Mm-hmm. Right? So, son, that's the one. So he had grown up over there, after he got kicked out when Canute the Great took over, right? And so they're like, well, I guess I'm over in Hungary now, ? And Edgar is 13, 14 at this point in time. And everyone is like, this kid's grown up over in Hungary. This is a absolute political maelstrom over here. We really can't put this kid on the throne. We've already come through Ethelred the Unready and things like that, and we don't really want to do that, right? So basically nothing comes of it because everyone is like, I just do not feel like dealing with it because he's just too much of a kid. There's you can't rally anyone. And fundamentally, if you can't rally anyone to the cause, nothing's going to happen. So they just slap, they slap poor old Harold on the throat, and they're like, okay, here you go, right? So it's just very confusing because there's a lot of versions of what happened here, right? Like, and we do know, for example, that like Edward and William got on. Like, we think that he went over to Normandy at a point in time, possibly because William had captured some of his cousins or something, and like he distinguishes himself like in battle. They go hunting. Edward like rescues some knights who get trapped in quicksand off Mont Saint Michel. Everyone's like, yeah, Edward's a really cool guy, and so Norman, this is great, like so. We do know that there's at least like some kind of friendship going on. So it's difficult to say that it didn't happen, but maybe both things happen is one thing that's true.
Yeah. Edward is I could see both things happening. I could see him promising it to a lot of people. He seems like the kind of guy where, like, if you kind of cornered him, he'd be like, I don't know, what about you can be king.
Yeah, exactly, right?
Me,
right.
sire? Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, before we go on, there is something that gets mentioned in this from time to time, and it is a witten or a vitten.
Yeah, I say
the
witten,
hell,
yeah.
what the hell is a witten or a wittan or whatever?
A witten is basically when the king, pre-Norman kings, call together all the lords and they have a little chat about what is to be done, right? So basically they'd say, okay, like all the advisors get together, all the nobles get together, and we talk about what's going on in the kingdom. It only happens when the king has like chosen individuals and he summons them. So, sometimes people say, oh, like there's a grand tradition in England of parliamentary things. And it's like, I don't know. I don't really think calling a cabinet meeting is... But, it's where they make really big decisions about things. And basically you need to be invited by the king. And that's how stuff gets done. Like, if something really important happens where a king is like, I absolutely need feedback on this, they call a witten, essentially.
Yeah. And the other thing before we kind of get going is sourcing. We got a lot of fucking sources here, people. The opposite of the problem we have in a lot of cases in history. We got so many damn sources.
Yeah.
Eleanor, do you just want to take us through them? I mean, there's the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, and there's
So I mean, the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle is one of the best to ever do it. So it's quite cool. And so basically, it is all written in Old English, which is cool. And it basically writes about like the kings pre-Norman, right? So it gets started out in the 9th century. During the reign of Alfred the Great, and they're kind of like, we are going to write ourselves a nice little history here, right? And so it gets worked on kind of like over time. Usually we think somewhere over in Wessex, but you need to understand that, of course, it being like existing kind of like for specifically creating a genealogy or a justification for the ruling of like these English speaking peoples like means it's a little bit stilted. So basically, like, it starts off a little bit more mythologizing, like especially when you're looking at things like back from like the 5th and 6th centuries, where they're like, and then there was giants. But like it does kind of like talk about when like the English speakers are settling like around in like Kent and stuff like that, for sure, right? And then it kind of like gets into the 7th and 8th centuries, and they're like, and this is when we figured out when Easter was, and things like that. And it talks like a lot about the conversion to Christianity processes. And then from the 9th century onward, it just becomes like a list. It's like, this happened, that happened, blah, 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 blah. So like it just kind of becomes a list of who takes over who. And like that's useful, though, even though like not all the dates are correct, but it kind of like gives us some insight into what it is that is happening politically, like in terms of just like a timeline, right? Then we also have stuff from Snorri Sturluson. Shout out. I know, like just check out the name on this guy. He's writing after the fact. Okay. So he is an Icelandic poet and historian. He writes the prose Edda. And that is like really, really cool because in it we know a lot about Norse kings, but also it's also where we get a lot of information about Norse mythology. So within it, this is where we get information about, Hrolf the Walker, so that's like as Rollo and things. So, he talks a lot about the establishment of Normanness, which is pretty cool. He gives us like a lot of sources of history at the time. Now, he would be writing it as a history after the fact. He's alive when all this is going on, but he's like baby. So, whatever. Then we've got the Bayeux Tapestry. Fuck yeah. Shout out to a real one. That's my girl. One of the best to ever do it. Fuck
just
yeah.
Reading tea leaves off of what these people stitched on there. Is that Edward or is that Edward? Where's Harold Godwinson? Who is this guy?
Yeah, it's really good. It's absolutely beautiful. Your girl's obsessed. Obviously, again, we have to take this with a grain of salt because it is very clearly, we think it's commissioned by Oda, the Bishop of Bayeux, who is also kind of like part of the invading party. And it's like he's stunting on the haters with this one. And it's like, it's sort of an attempt to present the conquest of England as like one big event. You just have this one thing that happens in 1066, and it's a battle between worthy adversaries, and the best man won, and isn't it all very noble, blah, 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 blah. Right? And in it, you see like, William meeting with Edward and them like shaking hands, and it's like, oh, now you can tell that he's the king or whatever. And then, there's preparing for war and blah, 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 blah. We even have to take this with a grain of salt in certain things. Like, there is, we think, an arrow gets added later to the death of Harold Godwinson, where like initially everyone was just saying like he got hacked up, like he got his legs cut off or whatever. But then like someone later goes in, puts an arrow in his eye because like a more romantic story got made up, right? So even then you've got to be very careful about it. But it is still an interesting source because it tells us what people want us to know, right? So it's like it's an artistic work designed for display to tell you about what's going on. Yeah. And it's really cool. Huge fan. Love that for me, right? So
Yeah, and there's a few more. A guy named William of Poitiers does like a really extremely pro Norman account.
The Gesta Guglielmi.
Yeah, there's amazing. We got names.
We got like,
so many names.
I name a clock, brah. Yeah.
Yeah. All throughout this. Yeah. So we've just got them all. There's even like Iceland or Norse sagas written about Harold Hardrada's life that also play into the, like it's just like we've got so many of these things, and that's just gonna it means that we have a lot of color on this, but it also means that some stuff just have to throw up our arms about and shrug. So we're going to introduce the four claimants, or four-ish claimants, I guess, to the throne and what their claims are. But before we get there, we have a specific question about Harold Godwinson, and it comes from Gaffsey as well. It says, can you all talk about attitudes towards Harold Godwinson? RIP. My understanding is that since 1066, the entire foundation of the English monarchy has been William the Conqueror had the claim to the English crown via Edward the Confessor, and Harold gobbins him as a usurping little one-eyed shit. However, it also seems like there was some romance about him as the last truly English king, and I'm curious when that emerged as a popular and aristocratic attitude, and how Norman-descended aristocracy squared their positions with romantic attitudes towards Harold/Anglo-Saxon England.
Okay, so basically, this is a great question, and what happens is with Harold Godwinson kind of like a coming to the throne. Basically, all of the English are like, absolutely not, no fucking Normans, no Normans club. Like, we are not, like, they are already so powerful. They already have so much money. They fuck with us all the time, like by letting Vikings camp out over there and come and raid us. It's one thing when you've got Edward the Confessor, who is, definitely has a direct lineage to kingship. It's another thing if it's just some guy William went hunting, like Edward went hunting with one time, right? Like, that's totally different. We are not fucking doing this, right? And as a part of this, Harold is like one of the richest and most well-connected of the English aristocracy. So it just kind of makes sense because he's got a really big army. They think that he's pretty well battle tested. He's somebody who, they're like, there's probably going to be a fight about this. So whomst among us can actually do this, right? So we'll get him out there on the throne. And, they were absolutely not of the opinion that maybe they are of the opinion that Harold is a usurper, but they're like, yeah, because fucking no Normans club, right? Like, we're not having it. Sorry about it. Like, no way, right? And then the Normans were like, well, I don't care. I'm going to kill you all now. I'm going to do some light genocide. I'm gonna like completely turn this into like a cash cow for myself, and this is what I'm going to do with my time, right? And, that's just kind of like the prevailing, like, oh ho, isn't it fun? You get the romanticization of like the pre-Norman English later on, especially in the Victorian kind of historiography, when we are inventing nationalism. Well, I mean,
Norman yoke. And
it's like, and like, granted, there are, of course, like, there is like creeping conceptions of nationalism even from the later medieval period, but basically it's like in the 19th century, it's very, very popular to be like, I am going to invent like a national mythology for my country to justify XYZ. And that is how we're going to like draw borders. And they look a lot of the time very specifically at medieval history for this because, well, duh, right? Like, you're not going to look at the Romans, are you? Because that's not going to give you a national story. So you look at the Middle Ages. And the English don't want you to talk about the fact that a bunch of French guys came over. So they're like, yeah, and fuck them. It should have been, the English. And it's like, dude, like, the English were getting their ass beat. Like, all the time. The Danes were coming over here and doing whatever. Like, maybe calm it down a stitch. But it also has to do very specifically with Protestantism. You'll be unsurprised to learn. So it's like, oh, well, if we hadn't been taken over by those terrible French Catholics, then we would have, like, it's an attempt to reorient English history to be in line with Germanic history so that you can be a little bit more Protestant about it. And like, that's why everyone's always jacking off about the term Anglo-Saxon, right? Like, that's how you get WASPs, right? It's like, oh yeah, there's something about us. I think, are we just better than everyone? Are we just better workers? Is that how we're rich? It's like, no, bitch, you just like take over countries all the time. Shut up. So yeah, like it's kind of like no one really cares. But then it definitely comes back. Like when, every time England has to go shopping for another Protestant monarch.
Yeah.
This stuff like, these guys are Germans, so reorienting yourself to the German makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Look, yeah. I feel don't get me wrong, I think the Normans shouldn't have done the genocide. Yeah. I think that was very bad, but I think that like waxing rhapsodic about like the slaving society of like early medieval England aided either. You know,
if you hadn't turned into godless Catholic French, you would have just been pagan for a lot longer, maybe even longer than it lasted up in Scandinavia, because you are an actual island, like
right?
You know, it's man, yeah, I guess, dude. Like,
fine.
Like,
you know?
if we hadn't done that, we'd have been pagan. Like, you know what? Fine, you're right. History would be a lot cooler if England had been pagan for, like, I don't know, like an extra 400 years. That, you're right. That would be neat. Thank you for that. Yeah. So yeah, that's Harold. He is, his claim specifically is that he is the Earl of Wessex, the most powerful and one of the wealthiest English noblemen. He's the father-in-law to Edward, through Edward's wife Edith. And he's a former kingmaker, and he may have been singled out by Edward to rule during a brief, lucid moment before death, although sounds a bit like horseshit to me. He was crowned by the Witan in January 1066, a few days after Edward's death, and this was possibly done by an illegitimate archbishop, depending on whom you ask. That's their business, not mine. Yeah. Next up, we have Tostig Godwinson.
Name alert.
Name alert. We missed out on a King Tostig. I mean, not really, because he never had a chance, but whatever. Tostig is the exiled brother of Harold Godwinson.
That's right.
The brother that Harold didn't like, because he really liked his other two brothers, apparently. But yeah, Tostig's claim is, if older brother Harold can do it, if older brother Harold can take this shit by fiat, why the fuck can't I take it by conquest?
Quite right too. You know?
He's absolutely right in that. His only problem is that he has very few troops. The very few troops he has don't like him, and he's also kind of a fuck up. But yeah, then we get to King Harold III of Norway, also known as Harold Hardrada.
I wish
and
he'd
we
won.
finally have a traceable claim based on evidence. King Harold Hardrada's claim: back in 1038, during Harthacnut's brief tenure on the throne, he and the Norwegian king Magnus the Great made a pact that if either died childless, the other would inherit both thrones and lands. There is historical evidence showing that this agreement was indeed in place, but historians also note that both Magnus and Harthacnut were aware that the survivor would have to fight to enforce the acceptance of its terms.
Yeah, Viking shit.
Yeah, Viking shit, exactly. But you, like, this is outside of Edmund, who we'll talk about in just a second, this is the only evidentiary claim that can actually be backed up in any way.
And it's a difficult one too, because it's like, well, sure, but there was also an interregnum.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, you're not wrong. It's just that, like, what about all that other time? Right?
Yeah, Harthacnut died in 1042. What were you doing? Just hanging? Like, you were like, well,
chilling.
I'm not gonna do, you know. And it's like, you know, Harold Hardrada couldn't come and enforce those claims until much later, and you know, so the claim seemed a lot more tenuous then. But you know, of all these, we do have an actual, like, you know, we could point to a piece of paper at least in this case.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to just come out, King Harold Hardrada. That's my team. Yeah. R.I.P. Mourn you till I join you. It should have been you. I don't know why Stamford Bridge shook out like that. I'm as shocked as you are. It would have been cool.
Yep.
I reckon it would have been cool.
Yep. Then we get old Billy of Normandy.
Know your boy. It's your boy.
Yeah, you know your boy. Yeah. William of Normandy's claim. He's the half brother of Edward through their mother. Emma of Normandy claimed that Edward had sworn that William would be his heir prior to his death, and what's more, that Harold Godwinson had been present at the event and agreed to it as well. Unsurprisingly, no evidence exists that such an agreement ever took place, but if you win, it doesn't really matter much, now does it? Yeah, and then poor Edmund Atheling.
No one cares. No one cares.
As Eleanor said, the grandson of Edmund Ironside, the son of Edward the Exile. His claim, he's the 14-year-old great-nephew of Edward the Confessor, but key, he's the last surviving male heir of Edward's direct family line, which would mean under the law of direct primogeniture, he's the one that has the claim to the throne. He will, he when the other four claimants stake their claims at the beginning, Edmund will not, because again he's 14 and didn't have any support. But hey, good news for him, he will briefly be named king-elect by the Witan in October 1066 after Harold Godwin's death. So he gets to be Edmund II for like
2 seconds,
a month, and he doesn't ever get crowned, because even they were like, yeah, I don't know.
Like, I'm probably not going to go force the issue, you know what I'm saying? You know.
Yeah. So yeah, and then we get the course of the war, I guess. Calling it a war seems, like putting a little bit too much lipstick on the pig there, but what are you going to do? From January 1066 to August 1066,
nothing's happening.
Nothing happens on England. There are some defensive preparations. Harold has the southern coast defended, and he has the northern coast defended. But other than that, nothing. Tostig might have done some light raiding and impressed some sailors.
Cute.
Before Harold got those soldiers in place. But then some of those men may have gone AWOL during the raids. Either way, as you can see, Tostig already kind of a joke here. In April, Halley's Comet made its regular pass, which was interpreted at the time as a symbol of the English succession crisis by some, and is also why a comet appears at the beginning of George R. R. Martin's A Clash of Kings. Just throw that one in there for everyone. Elsewhere,
it's in the Bayeux Tapestry.
Yes. Elsewhere, political intrigue was afoot. Tostig apparently got the hint that no one much cared for his claim to the throne and sought out partners in removing his brother. It is claimed by some historians that Tostig went to Normandy to forge an alliance with William in June, but was rebuffed as William was not yet ready to strike. It's unknown if that actually happened, but what is known for certain is that either in July or August, Tostig met and made an alliance with King Harald Hardrada of Norway, in which their forces would be combined.
What a hater. All-time hater. Like, hating your brother so much that, like, you're like, A, I'm going to attack. B, I'm just going to shop around and be like, hate. Like, whoops the fuck wants some help. I mean, I can't even be king, but I just don't want my brother to be.
He's gonna be offered clemency by his brother before Stamford Bridge and turn it down. Hate. My man is just hating, just all around.
I love it.
Number one hating ass motherfucker.
It wasn't until Kenrick that we've seen hating on this scale. It would be thousands of years. Like, welcome back.
Tostig. Welcome back, Tostig Godwinson. What a fucking name. If they won, Harold would be the king, and Tostig would be given massive estates. At this point, Tostig relinquishes his claim to the throne, leaving only 3 claimants for the time being. Hardrada and Tostig's combined strength would be reinforced by soldiers under the command of the Earl of Orkney, who was also allied to Hardrada. All told, the Hardrada-Tostig-Orkney alliance had around 10,000 soldiers. No cavalry is mentioned.
They're Vikings, Like, you don't be showing up with horses unless you're a Norman.
They barely have the wood, the timber to make boats. What the fuck? Where the fuck are they going to find horses?
Yeah, no, it ain't going to happen, right? Like, that's not how it works.
You either ride the reindeer like the Finns do, or, you
Hell yeah,
go
man.
back home. Yeah. On the continent, William marshaled his forces and secured his alliances so that he wouldn't be attacked in the rear the second he departed. Regardless of whether Harold met with Tostig, it is known that Harold's army was not yet ready until mid-August, but delayed even further, either because Harold Godwinson had reinforced the coast or extreme wind kept the ships in the harbor. William's force was somewhere around 8,000 to 10,000 men, divided between mostly infantry and a small cavalry contingent. They also maintained a small company of archers. Mm-hmm. On England itself, old Harold Godwinson went about consolidating his power and building his forces, but his rule was not certain as native English rebels appeared all over, joining with the invading forces in the coming battles. He relied on powerful nobles for defense and reinforcement, with the Earls of Northumbria and Mercia defending the north. By September, King Harold Godwinson of England likely had a force between 10,000 to 12,000, with about 2,000 cavalry. English archers were present during the conquest, though they were likely to be small in number because they are barely mentioned in any record. Contemporary Norman sources greatly exaggerated the size of Godwinson's army, with one saying it was more than 400,000 strong, and another saying it was more than 1.2 million strong.
Oh, yeah. Oh, for sure, man. Yeah.
Which would have been 71% of the island's total estimated population of about 1.7 million people at the time.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Totally.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man, you gotta love medieval battles. 10 guys fighting in a field, and they're like, it was the greatest, the most titanic thing. It's like, yeah, man. Cool.
All right, whatever, bro.
1.2 million. All right, dude. All right. We got 3 battles. We're gonna get through them before the end of this, and then we will pick it up next week, where we talk about everything else and the aftermath.
Everything else.
Yeah, and then set up the Anarchy, which is what we originally were going to talk about in the first place.
Woo!
Before I needlessly extended this series. All right, September 20th, the Battle of Fulford. Harold Hardrada and Tostig have teamed up, and they successfully land forces at Fulford. They only employ a little over half of their men to defeat the combined but small armies of the Earls of Mercia and Northumbria. In addition to having a much smaller force, the Northmen made several tactical blunders, ceding the high ground and leaving their flanks vulnerable by defending pushed up against marshland.
Yeah.
The English fought hard, but Hardrada's flanking attack decimated the English right, and the rout was on. The Earls of Mercia and Northumbria survived, but the city of York surrendered without a fight, and prisoners were taken.
I mean, that's just like what York does. It's like, fuck, Vikings are back.
Okay,
All
fine.
right, okay,
Take
whatever.
it. I don't care.
I don't know, man.
Leave me alone.
Whatever.
Stop. I don't want to do this. Why? Why am I? Stop it. I know we got pretty churches. Stop it. Leave them alone. Don't do it. You got some guy, walking out there, and they're like, Lindisfarne, motherfucker, and just gets stabbed by
just straight through the heart. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, September 25th, 1066, the Battle of Stamford Bridge. As soon as it became evident that the Hardrada Tostig alliance would be landing in the north, King Harold Godwinson gathered his most capable men and went off to fight them. This was fortuitous for Harold, given the outcome of the battle, but it may have lost him the war as it lessened coastal defenses, giving William a better chance at invading from the continent. After the defeat at Fulford, English forces reformed their lines and went to meet Hardrada, the Hardrada Tostig faction near the camp at Stamford Bridge. Mm-hmm. And if you were confused like me before you read the history on it, no, this is not the Stamford Bridge in London where Chelsea FC plays their games. It's the one in North England near York. Everybody in London is laughing at me now, and everybody in England is laughing at me now. Everybody outside is like, oh, okay, cool. So they didn't fight at the stadium.
Look, I don't know. Get more names.
Yeah, get more names. Oh, we named it a bridge, and we named a bridge in London after another.
Grow up.
grow the fuck up. Name it something better many, many years ago. You assholes. Yeah. Anyway, it's sorry. Oh man, that's what I get. Yeah. The problem was that Hardrada's army didn't realize the English were massing for battle until they saw them on the march a short distance away, and they made the decision to go into the battle without armor. And now, like, I know, like, we're all used to watching shows and stuff and video games where, like, armor doesn't do that much. And, I mean, it gets some attacks. Yeah, it probably wouldn't do that much. But
I would want to wear my armor.
I would want to wear my armor.
If you're
going to get hit 10 times, the armor might protect you from 8 or 9 of them, you know, and you want that. And this is going to show you why you don't go into battle without armor, but also just how badass these Norsemen were, because they still almost
they did almost win. Yeah, I know, man. What we could have had, you know.
Yeah,
I might have like a better socialized healthcare right now.
Yeah, and there's Snorri Sturluson describes a famous scene before the battle. A single rider from the English camp rode up to Harald Hardrada and Tostig. He offered Tostig to return, and he would be given his lands if he turned against Hardrada. Tostig asked what they would, give Harold for his trouble, and the rider replied that they would give Harold 7 feet of English ground, as he is taller than other men. Get it? Because you're buried 6 feet under. He's 7 feet. Get it? Woo. Then he rode back to the Saxon host. And then Hardrada was like, wow, I'm so impressed by that rider. Who was he? And Tostig was like, that's Harold Godwinson. And you're like, that's a great story. However,
absolutely did not happen.
What the fuck? Like,
come on, man. Come on, bruh.
Like, oh, this is your, that sound you were looking for? This is your brother, Marvin Godwinson. It's like, yeah, okay, cool. They all talked and had a nice little parlay before the thing. Thank you, Snorri.
Sure.
I know the English love that 7 feet of English soil or whatever. So there you go, fellas, ladies, everyone. Cry
Why not?
For whatever. You know what I said earlier. Yeah, anyway, as the Battle of Stamford Bridge goes on, the English army was delayed by a brave Norse defense of Stamford Bridge. According to some sources, it was defended for some time by a single Norseman wielding an axe who felled like 60 Englishmen, which is awesome whether it happened or not. And this allowed the Norse forces to form a shield wall. However, lacking armor, they were severely weakened and pushed back hundreds of yards past the bridge by the relentless English advance. At some point, Hardrada took an arrow through the neck and Tostig was killed, which caused the army of the alliance to be annihilated. Nearly all of the Hardrada, Tostig, Orkney warriors were killed or captured. And yeah, only 2 claimants remain now. Everything's going swell for old Harold Godwinson.
Now, just to make a point, right?
Yeah.
This whole time, William's been dicking about over in Normandy. And he's like, now. And we think that possibly it's about the amount of time between when he gets on the move and when Stamford Bridge happens. It's just about enough time for a messenger to get from around there down to Normandy via boat.
Yeah.
So basically, we think that William rather cannily was like, I don't know, the vibes are off, right? Until like he sees this opening and he's like, all right, and fucking now, right? And he sails, and so you've got this totally exhausted army who just won a miraculous battle, and they need to like now march the entire length of the goddamn country. Yeah, just saying.
Yeah, October 14th, the Battle of Hastings. Everybody get excited. It's one of those English battles you learn about. Although this one is actually fun, I'll give him that. A lot of the English battles you learn about, incredibly boring, but not this one. With the southern coast lightly defended, William made his landing on the 28th of September at Pevensey, beginning the very short, almost leisurely march east toward the coastal town of Hastings.
It's a really nice walk. I've done it a couple times.
I'm sure it's lovely. William's army was 7,000 to 10,000 strong and ready to fight with infantry, archers, and cavalry. Historians also consider William and his counselors to have been the superior battle strategists and tacticians, having fought many successful wars and battles to defend their Norman land and extend their influence on the mainland. On the other hand, King Harold Godwinson's army, which I'll just refer to as the English for the sake of avoiding confusion, was, well, they were in confusing shape. His superior numbers and the element of surprise had won the day at Stamford Bridge, but it was hard fought and they suffered at least 2,000 casualties. After that, they marched nearly the entirety of modern day England from north to south to reach William's army over a 2-week period. You might think this would mean that they were tired, but that wasn't the case, as Harold's army rested for a week in London before going to Hastings. They appeared well rested by the time they arrived, with about 7,000 soldiers remaining. What's strange is that it was composed entirely of infantry after losing all cavalry and archers at Stamford Bridge. So they were rested, but had been made fully one-dimensional regardless of their size. Additionally, none could doubt the bravery and resolve of Harold's army, but they were apparently extremely uncoordinated at times, and his tactics and leadership, or at least that of his generals, has been questioned ever since the battle itself. Upon arriving at Hastings, Harold situated his men in the shape of a crescent moon on top of a hill, and that was situated between woods on each side, with marshy ground in front of them, forming an overlapping shield wall to protect their ranks. Hardened warriors were placed along the front line, with less experienced soldiers stationed behind them for support. A truly advantageous position given the high ground and favorable terrain. William broke his force into 3 contingents, with Bretons on the left, him leading Normans in the center, and other assorted French contingents on the right. Despite hindsight, this would not be a walk-in-the-park victory for William. 1 second. Sorry. Okay. Unfortunately, the Battle of Hastings is hard to make sense of due to sourcing issues, but, it's not the lack of sources. It's we have too many of them, and they make everything contradictory. We have the vague outline with little in the way of definitive answers. We know the battle lasted from morning to evening, with a short lull in the middle of the day. We know the initial Norman push was rebuffed by the English shield wall, which caused the Breton contingent on the left to break, and rumors began to swirl that William had been killed in combat. All this combined to unnerve the whole of William's army, which began a very brief general retreat that was pursued zealously by some in the English front line. This pursuit would be Harold's undoing, because William was in fact very much alive and he rode through his lines. Seeing that their lord yet lived reinvigorated the Norman fighting spirit, and they reformed their lines, and along with the heavy counterattack completely enveloped the pursuing English, forcing the rest to fall back to another hillock where they again formed ranks. This appears to be when the Normans backed off and there was a brief lull where both armies ate rations and changed strategies. Most historians agree that William took notice of the dogged English pursuit when the Norman lines broke, which led his war council to go all in on a strategy of feigned retreats, a tactic which they had used in previous battles. In the afternoon, after the battle was rejoined, William's forces would engage the English, give a bit of ground, then break and flee, only to turn on a dime and fight as soon as the pursuers got far enough away from their lines. No single line broke the English, or no single feint broke the English line, as the pursuits were usually made by very small contingents of soldiers reacting in the heat of battle and likely doing so against orders. However, the Normans kept using this one weird trick all day, and slowly and steadily bleeding the English forces over the course of hours. As the English kept pursuing the feints, they lost more and more soldiers, including many of their hardiest warriors in the front, badly unbalancing their lines and leaving holes ripe for Norman exploitation. Finally, the Norman charge fully penetrated the English lines late in the day, and fierce fighting ensued, in which Harold Godwinson was likely killed, leading his army to break and flee before being routed by or surrendering to their pursuers. But other than that very vague summary, that's all we know with much certainty. We don't know how many horses were killed under William during the battle, whether it was 2 or 3, because apparently some were, but we don't know how many. We don't know what, if any, effect William's archers had on the battle or how the Normans employed cavalry charges. We don't know why this seemingly obvious feigned retreat gambit kept working against the English. We don't know when Harold Godwinson's 2 loyal brothers, Gurth, amazing name, and Leofwine, amazing name, were killed.
We must return.
Girth Godwinson, please.
Leofwine. If anyone's having a kid, I dare you.
Yep.
All
Name
right.
them Girth and Leofwine. That's right. Yeah. They were killed and their bodies were brought to the king's side. Nobody knows when that happened. Hell, we don't even really know when Harold himself was killed or how it happened. At least 2 sources say he was killed early in the day. That makes little sense because the army kept fighting all day. So it is assumed based on the other sources and common sense that he died later on. It seems likely, given some sources, like the Bayeux Tapestry, that Harold died from taking an arrow through the eye. But, as Eleanor said, that may be a later flourish that was added to this and other later accounts, and he had just been hacked down in battle like, normally happens. Or maybe both. Maybe he took the arrow and got hacked down at the same time, and, history's just funny like that. Whatever the case may be, William of Normandy and his army were victorious at Hastings, and this left them the only standing army in England. Hardrada's Norsemen and Orkney allies had all died or fled, and Godwinson's English army had been fully broken, and the survivors were in custody or in hiding. And there's a bit more here to the actual conquest before you get to
Sure is.
to William being crowned. Because they got to do a bit of light terror burning, and we got to get little Edmund not crowned, but at least elected for a month and a half. That was nice of him.
Cute.
They did it for a Make-A-Wish kid. That was nice. Yeah, but we're gonna get to that next time because it'll just we can just call it all the aftermath of this, and we can talk about from the aftermath of the end of the conquest. We got the revolts of the earls. Everybody loves the earls revolt. We'd love to talk about it.
I do.
We love to watch them get fucking annihilated. Fun times, and then we can talk about all the other stuff that leads up to the anarchy, and we'll start getting towards that. So we'll save it for next time. But spoiler alert: William is the conqueror. He's top dog now. Good job, Bill. You did it. Congratulations. Job's not done, but we'll get there next time. That's going to do it for us today. Except Eleanor, what's going on with you?
If you haven't checked out Saran Jones Surviving the Witch Trials on Channel 4 over here in the UK yet, please do. I don't know, tell them how great you think I am. Just at them on Twitter and be like, damn, that bitch is so good. Please give her work.
Awesome.
Oh my God, she's amazing. Otherwise, I'm on the socials at Going Medieval. I am, nominally on holiday. You can tell. So not a lot going on at the blog this week, but I'll get back at you soon.
Yep. And I'm Lucas Amazing on the socials. You can watch me slowly devolve into madness here in the good old US of A. You can find me there, Lucas Amazing. You can find my old show, People's History of the Old Republic, wherever you're listening to this. And it's going to about do it for us today. So thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.
Bye.